What if the most powerful weapon against terrorism isn't a drone or a missile, but a thought? For decades, the world has fought terrorism with force: military strikes, intelligence operations, and security crackdowns. Yet despite billions spent and countless lives lost, the cycle of violence persists. These traditional methods often fail because they target symptoms rather than the root causes. Terrorism is not just about weapons or territory. It begins in the mind. Radicalization grows from complex psychological, social, and neurological factors: trauma, identity crises, loneliness, and the desperate search for meaning. These vulnerabilities are exploited by recruiters who manipulate emotions and rewire beliefs, creating fierce loyalty to violent ideologies. But the brain is not fixed. Science now reveals its remarkable ability to change and heal. Neuroplasticity means that even the most hardened minds can be rewired with new ideas, empathy, and purpose. Education, psychology, and brain science offer us tools more powerful than bombs. Tools to transform hate into understanding, fear into connection, and violence into peace. This book explores how ideas, when wielded wisely, can dismantle the mental foundations of terrorism. It shows how human connection, community, technology, and compassionate education can become the real weapons for lasting peace. In a world desperate for new solutions, this is a call to reimagine warfare, not with more destruction, but with knowledge, empathy, and brainpower. Because the battle for peace begins understanding the terrorist mind. To truly fight terrorism, we must first understand how the terrorist mind develops. Terrorism is not born from empty hatred or random violence. It is a complex product of psychological, neurological, and social factors that shape a person's beliefs and actions over time. Many terrorists begin their journey in places marked by trauma and instability. Childhood experiences of abuse, neglect, or loss can leave deep emotional scars, making individuals vulnerable to radical ideas. Psychological research shows that when someone suffers trauma, their brain's emotional centers become hyperactive, causing pain and confusion that can distort their sense of identity and reality. These wounds make it easier for extremist recruiters to step in with promises of belonging, purpose, and revenge. Identity crisis plays a central role. In a world where individuals struggle to find meaning and acceptance, extremist groups offer a clear, if dangerous, path. They provide a strong in-group identity, giving recruits a sense of pride and power that may have been missing in their lives. This social belonging is crucial because humans are wired to seek connection. When isolated or marginalized, the brain craves community, even if it is built on violent ideology. Neurologically, the process of radicalization exploits the brain's natural ability to change. Neuroplasticity. Recruiters leverage emotional pain and repetitive messaging to rewire neural pathways. They use stories, symbols, and rituals that reinforce extremist beliefs, creating strong emotional associations that are difficult to break. The brain becomes trained to respond to certain triggers with anger, fear, or loyalty to the cause. Cognitive distortions, ways the mind twists reality, also feed into radicalization. Terrorists often view the world in black and white: friends or enemies, good or evil, us versus them. This simplified worldview justifies violence as necessary and righteous. It shuts down empathy for others and amplifies feelings of grievance and hatred. Real-world examples show this pattern clearly. For instance, many former extremists describe how recruiters patiently exploited their personal pain and doubts, offering clear answers and emotional support. Some were young people searching for identity, others adults caught in cycles of poverty and discrimination. In all cases, the transformation began with the brain's vulnerability and a desperate need for meaning. Understanding these roots is essential. Terrorism cannot be defeated by force alone because it lives inside the mind's complex network of trauma, identity, and belief. Only by recognizing how terroristic ideologies take hold in the brain can we begin to dismantle them, replacing violence with education, empathy, and healing. This chapter lays the foundation for exploring how science and psychology can unlock power to change. If radicalization can rewire the brain, then so can rehabilitation. The same neuroplasticity that allows extremist ideologies to take hold also allows new, peaceful beliefs to replace them. The human brain is not fixed. It is dynamic, adaptable, and constantly reshaping itself based on experiences, emotions, and environment. This is the scientific foundation of hope. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. It's how we learn new skills, overcome trauma, and form new habits. In the context of terrorism, this means that even deeply held violent beliefs are not permanent. With the right interventions, education, empathy, purpose, and positive social environments, the brain can unlearn hate and relearn trust. Education plays a key role in this rewiring. When people are exposed to new perspectives, ideas, and experiences, the brain begins to question old assumptions. Learning activates the prefrontal cortex, responsible for critical thinking and decision-making. It weakens the emotional grip of fear-based ideologies by encouraging rational analysis. Importantly, education doesn't just mean textbooks. It can be conversations, stories, art, or shared experiences that challenge extremist narratives. Empathy is another powerful tool for rewiring. Neuroscience has revealed the presence of mirror neurons, brain cells that activate when we observe others' emotions and actions. These neurons are essential for empathy. They allow us to feel what others feel. When individuals engage in compassionate dialogue, see others as human, or hear personal stories from victims, these empathy circuits can override programmed hatred. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone, is released during moments of trust, bonding, and social connection. It promotes cooperation and reduces fear. By creating safe, emotionally supportive environments, we help the brain produce oxytocin, making it easier for people to connect and care. Emotional safety, feeling seen, heard, and valued, is critical to the de-radicalization process. Equally important is narrative replacement. Terrorist ideologies are built on stories, tales of oppression, revenge, glory. To dismantle these, we must offer better stories, narratives of forgiveness, purpose, dignity, and contribution. When the brain hears and internalizes these, it begins to form new emotional associations. Over time, these replace the neural pathways that once justified violence. Change is not instant, but it is possible. People can move from hate to healing, from isolation to connection, from destruction to purpose. The science is clear. The brain can be rewired. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore how education systems, community programs, and even technology are using this science to transform minds, not with threats, fighting with thought, not with threats. When weapons fail to silence extremism, words and ideas must take their place. Around the world, a quiet revolution is emerging, one where education, dialogue, and empathy are the tools used to disarm hatred and transform radical minds. This is not idealism. It's neuroscience, psychology, and lived experience converging to show that thought, not threat, can be the ultimate counterterrorism strategy. De-radicalization programs in various countries are proving this point. In Saudi Arabia, former extremists are enrolled in a multi-phase rehabilitation process that includes religious re-education, psychological counseling, and even art therapy. The goal isn't to punish, but to reframe their worldview. In Denmark, the Aarhus model goes a step further, offering returning jihadists mentorship, housing, education, and community reintegration, based on the principle that inclusion, not isolation, is the way back from extremism. These programs don't rely on force, they rely on connection. Human conversation, real, respectful, and persistent, is a transformative weapon. It helps individuals question their beliefs without fear of judgment or violence. When former radicals are engaged in dialogue rather than interrogation, they begin to open up, reflect, and reconsider. It's the beginning of mental liberation. Storytelling is central to this process. When someone hears the personal journey of a victim, a refugee, or even a reformed extremist, the brain's empathy networks activate. These stories bypass logic and speak directly to emotion. They plant seeds of doubt in extremist narratives and sow the possibility of new identity formation. Stories humanize the other, and that is the first crack in the armor of radical belief. Education systems must also evolve into frontline peace builders. Instead of merely teaching facts, they must cultivate emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and intercultural understanding. When students learn to analyze arguments, recognize manipulation, and express emotions constructively, they become mentally resilient against extremist ideologies. Emotional regulation is another key element. Many who join violent movements are not only angry, they are overwhelmed by it. Teaching individuals how to manage anger, fear, and frustration through mindfulness, breathing techniques, or guided reflection helps calm the reactive brain and re-engage rational thinking. When the nervous system feels safe, the mind can begin to shift. This chapter is a call to rethink the fight. It's not about overpowering minds with more control. It's about unlocking them with understanding. Thought is not weak. It's a weapon of clarity, capable of dismantling ideologies built on confusion and pain. The fight against terror doesn't need louder voices. The role of community and connection. Terrorism does not thrive in spaces of belonging. It grows in the shadows of isolation. Disconnection from community, family, and a sense of identity is a recurring theme in the lives of those drawn into violent extremism. Understanding this allows us to shift our focus. Instead of only trying to fix individuals, we must repair the environments that made them vulnerable in the first place. Humans are wired for connection. The brain interprets social exclusion as physical pain. When individuals feel rejected, unseen, or misunderstood, especially over long periods, their psychological need for belonging becomes desperate. Extremist groups recognize and exploit this. They offer a place to belong, a cause to fight for, and a new family that validates their worth, even if through destruction. But what if we could provide that sense of belonging without the violence? Programs around the world are proving we can. Inclusive community initiatives that create real, meaningful relationships are powerful tools in preventing and reversing radicalization. Mentorship plays a crucial role. When former radicals are paired with mentors, often individuals who've been through similar paths and come out transformed, it creates a bridge of trust. The brain begins to mirror the mentor's emotional and behavioral patterns, gradually shifting identity. Mentors help individuals rebuild their sense of self, guiding them away from the need to prove their worth through violence. Peer support systems are equally impactful. Group sessions where individuals can speak freely, be heard without judgment, and feel emotionally safe activate healing processes in the brain. The oxytocin released in these positive interactions reduces fear and fosters trust. When someone is rehumanized, when they are seen not as a threat, but as a person in pain, they begin to rehumanize others in turn. One remarkable model is victim-offender dialogue. In several post-conflict programs, victims of violence have voluntarily met with perpetrators, not to punish, but to understand and forgive. These emotionally intense encounters break cognitive barriers in the minds of former extremists. They often report a shift from justification to remorse, and from anger to empathy. The encounter forces their brain to process the humanity of the enemy, destroying the simplistic narratives they once believed. Ultimately, communities are our first and strongest defense against extremism. Schools, places of worship, neighborhoods, these are not just locations. They are living ecosystems where minds are shaped and hearts are opened. When communities foster inclusion, purpose, and connection, they become healing spaces that make extremist ideologies unnecessary and unattractive. The battle is not against people, it's against disconnection. And the cure is not control. Technology meets psychology. In the digital age, radicalization no longer happens only in secret meetings or war-torn streets. It happens through screens. Extremist ideologies now travel through social media, encrypted messaging apps, and online forums, reaching vulnerable minds with speed and precision. But just as technology can be used to spread hate, it can also be harnessed to heal. When combined with psychology and neuroscience, modern tech becomes a powerful tool to prevent, detect, and reverse radicalization. Artificial intelligence, AI, is already being used to track patterns of online behavior that signal the early stages of radicalization. Machine learning algorithms can scan conversations, posts, and video engagement for emotional triggers, ideological shifts, or sudden changes in content consumption. While privacy must be respected, these tools allow early intervention, sometimes before hate turns into harm. But detection is only half the story. Prevention is where innovation truly shines. Imagine a teenager starting to explore extremist content online. What if, instead of being pulled further down that path, their feed begins to show emotionally resonant videos, stories of former extremists turned peace builders, or interactive messages inviting reflection rather than reaction? Smart content delivery systems can use behavioral science to redirect curiosity toward compassion. One groundbreaking application is virtual reality, VR. VR empathy simulations allow users to walk in someone else's shoes, whether that's a refugee, a victim of terrorism, or someone from a different culture. These immersive experiences activate the brain's mirror neurons, creating genuine emotional resonance and reducing prejudice. Empathy, once abstract, becomes visceral. Social media campaigns are also evolving. Instead of just countering extremist messages with facts, which often fail, successful initiatives focus on emotional storytelling, humor, and authenticity. Former radicals sharing their stories on YouTube, survivors creating short films on TikTok, or influencers modeling interfaith friendship, these are modern-day antibodies against ideological infection. Apps and games are being designed to subtly build emotional intelligence, conflict resolution skills, and intercultural awareness. These tools don't preach, they engage. Through gameplay and narrative design, they activate neural pathways related to cooperation, perspective taking, and critical thinking, which inoculate the brain against black and white thinking and extremist propaganda. On the therapeutic front, neurofeedback and biofeedback technologies are being used to calm hyperaroused nervous systems, common among individuals susceptible to radicalization. By showing real-time data on brain activity and teaching users how to regulate stress and emotion, these tools restore a sense of internal control and reduce reactivity. Technology is not the enemy, it's a mirror. When guided by ethical psychology and human-centered design, it can become an ally in reshaping thoughts that healing trauma and building peace. The future of fighting terror doesn't lie in shutting down the internet, but in opening up better digital pathways for connection, transforming prisons into brain labs. Prisons have long been treated as warehouses for punishment, but for many radicalized individuals, incarceration becomes a breeding ground for deeper extremism. Isolation, resentment, humiliation, these are not just conditions of confinement. They're psychological triggers that reinforce the very ideologies the system hopes to suppress. But what if prisons could be redesigned, not as factories of fear, but as laboratories of transformation? The human brain is shaped by its environment. In prisons, where hostility and dehumanization are common, the brain responds by reinforcing threat responses, heightening suspicion, aggression, and tribal loyalty. This is especially dangerous for those already indoctrinated into black and white worldviews. Without intervention, prison can turn ideologically confused individuals into hardened extremists. But science offers an alternative. Brain-based cognitive rehabilitation programs are emerging around the world, using insights from psychology, neuroscience, and education to rewire how inmates think, feel, and relate. These initiatives don't focus on punishment, they focus on plasticity. One key element is trauma-informed therapy. Many incarcerated extremists have histories of deep psychological wounds, abuse, abandonment, or exposure to violence. Unprocessed trauma distorts perception and fuels radical thinking. Therapeutic programs that help inmates recognize and regulate their emotions, revisit painful memories safely, and rebuild internal security have shown powerful effects. The goal is not just to calm the brain, but to create space for new thoughts to emerge. Cognitive behavioral training is another pillar. Inmates are taught how to question their automatic thoughts, examine their beliefs, and understand the consequences of their actions. This rewires the neural pathways that once justified violence. Over time, it builds the mental flexibility needed for empathy, accountability, and change. Spirituality and mindfulness also play a transformative role. In prison systems across Indonesia, India, and parts of Europe, meditation and yoga have been introduced not as religion, but as tools for self-awareness. These practices quiet the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and activate regions related to compassion and self-control. Mindfulness helps individuals detach from extremist narratives and see themselves as more than their past choices. Equally important is purpose-based learning. When inmates are given access to education, creative expression, or vocational skills tied to personal growth, their sense of identity begins to shift. They no longer see themselves only as offenders, but contributors, students, artists, or mentors. Purpose gives the brain a new direction. Finally, restorative justice programs, where inmates meet the families of victims or engage in community healing circles, create powerful neurological shifts. These encounters break the cycle of dehumanization and awaken moral emotions, guilt, remorse, and the desire to repair. Transforming prisons into brain labs is not just a theory, it's a necessity. If we want lasting change, we must stop recycling hate through punishment and start cultivating peace through neuroscience. A changed brain can as a vaccine against hatred. Hatred is not born, it is taught. And just like any harmful ideology, it can be prevented before it takes root. The most powerful and long-lasting defense against extremism is not surveillance or security, it is education. But not the kind of education that merely fills minds with facts. We need an education system that shapes emotionally intelligent, critically thinking, and empathetic individuals. In other words, we need brain-friendly education that builds peace from the inside out. Traditional schooling often prioritizes conformity over creativity, obedience over understanding. In such systems, students may memorize historical events without ever understanding the human pain behind them. They may solve equations without ever learning how to solve emotional conflicts. But when education begins to address the whole brain, the logical, the emotional, and the social, it becomes a tool for transformation. Emotional intelligence must be at the core of any modern curriculum. Children should learn to recognize their emotions, regulate them, and empathize with others. This is not just a soft skill, it's neurological training. The more students practice empathy and self-awareness, the stronger their neural circuits for compassion and reflection become. Over time, this becomes a shield against the emotional manipulation often used in extremist recruitment. Intercultural competence is another critical area. In today's interconnected world, young minds must be taught to understand and appreciate differences, whether in religion, race, language, or lifestyle. When children hear stories from multiple perspectives, engage in dialogue with diverse peers, and are encouraged to ask questions rather than accept biases, their brains begin to form inclusive mental maps of the world. They stop seeing others as threats and start seeing them as fellow humans. Teaching history through empathy is a powerful strategy. Instead of glorifying war or sanitizing violence, educators can focus on the emotional realities of those affected. What did it feel like to be displaced, to lose a family, to suffer injustice? Neuroscience shows that storytelling activates emotional centers in the brain, making lessons more memorable and morally impactful. This kind of education doesn't just inform, it transforms. Teachers play a pivotal role in this vision. More than transmitters of knowledge, they are emotional role models, everyday peacemakers. A single supportive teacher can counter years of neglect or hate a child may have experienced elsewhere. Training teachers in trauma-informed practices, communication, and emotional leadership can multiply the reach of peace education exponentially. Schools, then, must become sanctuaries of safety and imagination, not factories of fear. By redesigning education to build resilient, thoughtful, and empathetic minds, we create not just students, but peacekeepers. In a world where hatred spreads like a virus, education is the vaccine, and every child educated for peace becomes purpose and peace. At the core of every human brain is a simple yet profound need: purpose. When people, especially the young, lack a sense of meaning, they become vulnerable to any ideology that promises identity, belonging, and significance. This is precisely how violent extremism often takes hold. But what if, instead of trying to remove radical ideologies, we focused on replacing them with meaningful, nonviolent paths to purpose? The human brain craves coherence. It wants to feel that life has a story, and that the self plays an important role in that story. Extremist recruiters understand this deeply. They offer a distorted but compelling narrative. You are chosen, you have a mission, you will be remembered. When someone who feels invisible suddenly feels seen, powerful, and part of a greater cause, their brain responds with a surge of dopamine and identity affirmation. This is how violent ideologies rewire purpose. But the brain can be rewired again, this time toward peace. Programs around the world are showing that when individuals are given new opportunities to serve, contribute, and create, their minds begin to heal and reorient. Former militants have become mentors, artists, teachers, and entrepreneurs, not because they were forced to, but because they were offered a better narrative. You still matter, but now your strength builds, not breaks. Creative expression is a powerful tool for this rewiring. Art, music, storytelling, and theater activate deep emotional circuits in the brain. They allow individuals to process trauma, communicate complex feelings, and reshape their identities. Former extremists who engage in such practices often report a transformation, not just in how they see others, but in how they see themselves. Service-based learning is another key. When youth engage in helping others, whether through community projects, social entrepreneurship, or humanitarian missions, they begin to experience a nonviolent sense of significance. Their brains start associating fulfillment with contribution, not conflict. Purpose becomes linked to healing, not harm. One of the most successful methods is peer-led transformation. When reformed individuals tell their stories to those still at risk, the message hits home. Their journey is living proof that change is possible. The brain sees the model and begins to mirror it. New neural patterns form, not through lectures, but through lived experience. Ultimately, lasting peace requires that we offer more than warnings and restrictions. We must offer a new identity, a new role, and a new way to matter. When we show individuals, especially young people, that they are seen, valued, and powerful without violence, we deactivate the very need that extremism exploits. The war for peace is not fought with fear, it is won with purpose. Give a brain something noble to live for, and it will forget what it was willing to die. The global movement. We stand at a turning point in human history. For decades, the world has fought terror with tanks, missiles, and intelligence operations. Yet terrorism persists. Not because we lack force, but because we've neglected the most powerful weapon of all, the human mind. To truly end cycles of violence, we must stop focusing only on destroying threats and start focusing on building minds. This is not just an idea. It is the foundation of a global movement. Brains, not bombs. Across continents, pockets of innovation are proving that psychology, neuroscience, and compassion can do what force alone cannot: reclaim lives, rewire hate, and reimagine peace. But for this to work at scale, it must become a united global initiative. Governments have a crucial role to play, not just in policy, but in shifting priorities. Budgets that once funded weapons must begin to fund education, trauma recovery, and community building. Military intelligence must work alongside psychological insight. National security must include neural security. Ministries of defense and ministries of education must collaborate to protect not just borders, but brains. NGOs and humanitarian organizations must adopt neuroscience-informed practices. Many already work in conflict zones, but they can go further by integrating emotional healing, purpose building, and education rooted in empathy. Programs that restore identity and rebuild trust must be seen as frontline interventions, not afterthoughts. Scientists and researchers hold the keys to unlocking new methods of rehabilitation, early detection, and prevention. Neuroscience labs can collaborate with peace-building organizations, turning insights about memory, emotion, and identity into actionable strategies. Brain scans should not only be used to study soldiers, but also to help rehabilitate the minds of those once considered enemies. Educators are the quiet revolutionaries. Every classroom is a front line, every child a potential peacemaker. Teachers must be trained not just in subjects, but in emotional leadership. Schools must become centers of inclusion, curiosity, and critical thought. A global curriculum for peace, one that weaves together science, history, empathy, and intercultural understanding, can inoculate future generations against ideological poison. The Brains Not Bombs movement isn't about choosing weakness over strength. It's about redefining strength itself. True power lies not in domination, but in transformation. Not in fear, but in understanding. This movement calls on all sectors, governments, educators, scientists, artists, spiritual leaders, and parents, to unite behind one mission: rewiring the world for peace. Terrorism may hijack minds, but we can liberate them, one thought at a time, one life at a time, one nation at a time. The future is not written in warheads. It's written in neurons. And if we come together, the next chapter of humanity can be the one where peace finally Terror is not a virus in the air. It is a thought in the mind, a belief that violence brings meaning, that destruction earns honor, that hatred offers identity. But if thoughts can be taught, they can also be retaught. If minds can be trained for war, they can be rewired for peace. The revolution we need now is not in weapons or strategies. It is in ideas. Throughout this audiobook, we've journeyed through prisons and classrooms, through trauma and transformation, through brain science and human stories. What emerges is clear. The fight against terrorism is not just a military or political battle. It is a psychological, neurological, and cultural one. And this battle can be won, not by silencing the hateful, but by amplifying the hopeful. We've seen how trauma warps perception, how purpose can be hijacked, and how the brain's plasticity allows for radical change. We've uncovered real-world examples where love outwitted hate, where education outshined propaganda, where connection replaced isolation. These are not isolated miracles. They are proof that a new model is possible. The old methods, surveillance, punishment, retaliation, have a role, but they are reactive. They address symptoms. The idea revolution addresses the root. It doesn't just say no to terrorism, it shows a better yes to life. A life with meaning, dignity, and belonging that doesn't come at the cost of someone else's. This revolution needs you. Whether you're an educator shaping young minds, a scientist researching the brain, a policymaker designing justice systems, or a parent nurturing empathy at home, you are on the front lines. You don't need permission to be a peace builder. You just need to start with one person, one conversation, one change in how you see the world. What if the next global superpower isn't the country with the largest military, but the one with the deepest compassion and the smartest minds? What if, instead of investing billions in bombs, we invested billions in brains? What if peace wasn't a dream we whisper, but a design we engineer? It starts now. The age of brute force is fading. The age of brain force is dawning. Because in the end, the most powerful weapon is not a drone, a gun, or a wall. It's an idea. And it lives in you.